morning and welcome to our DMAC Ask a Professional event. Thank you all for being here. We are live at the Ankeny Funeral Home and we are going to interview funeral director Tiffany Taylor. Really with these events, our hope is that they're linking maybe your education and your career interests to professionals that work in those industries right here in Central Iowa. I also would like to mention that DMAC does have a mortuary science program that Tiffany actually graduated from. So we will hear a little bit more about her experience through the program. And I also did include the mortuary science program information in our correspondence email. So for those of you that are interested in learning a little bit more about that, feel free to check that out on our website. And then my name is Jill Hoyk. I will be your host today. I work a part of the work-based learning team, and I have my colleague behind the camera, Emily Willett, too as well. So again, she will be engaging with you all in the chat. And if you do have any questions for Tiffany, please let us know. Well, with that, I would love to get to know our professional for today. Like I mentioned, we have funeral director Tiffany Taylor with us. And thank you for letting us into your space today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And learning a little bit more about your career. And so with that, I'll kind of open up the question.
Okay.
What got you interested in this? Have you always, once you were a little girl, is this something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did you kind of find your way through this?
I think what ultimately got me interested in the field is when I was in high school, both of my grandparents passed away. And I thought that was a really unique experience. And then in 2007, my teenage brother died in a car wreck. And so at that moment, I really was able to get more of a foot in the door, and I worked part-time at a family-owned funeral home in Red Oak, Iowa. And that's where I kind of realized that this is kind of what I want to do. Being able to help people, especially if you've been through the experience yourself, you can actually relate to people, and that's a pretty big deal when you're meeting families, for sure. So I guess a little bit about my background, if that's okay. I've been licensed for 5 years. I did go to DMAC and complete the program there. And then I've been a manager here for SCI, which we're Service Corporation International. So we are the corporate owned funeral homes. So there's a lot of aspects that come with that versus the local funeral homes. But I've been here for about 8 years, and yeah, I love what I do. I really do.
And can you kind of talk us through, I know we were talking this morning, kind of giggling about your schedule and your day-to-day, but can you kind of walk us through maybe what a day-to-day looks like for you?
Sure. It really kind of depends. We always say it depends on the night before, so let's say like last night, I ended up going on a call early this morning, and then I also have a visitation this afternoon. And so I have my other folks kind of helping me out because I know I had this today. So, you could be sitting at your desk, doing some paperwork, following up with a family. You may need to up and leave right away and actually go on a death call because a family has requested our services, or you may have to get packed up and ready to go to a service. So, there could be 10 things going on that day, and you just have to prioritize, manage your time, and get it done. So there is no typical work day. There is no 8 to 5, 9 to 5. So some days are longer than others.
Yeah. And so how many funeral directors are employed here? And then how do you decipher who takes what call and that type of thing?
So we have 3 locations. We've got one in West Des Moines, which is McLaren's Rest Haven, Ankeny Funeral Home, and then we also have Stevens Memorial Chapel, which is in Ames, Iowa. On a good day, we have 6 arranging directors and 1 care center person. Well, unfortunately, we're down 3 directors right now. So we're kind of spread out a little bit more, but we kind of have the normal, like there's 3 directors down at McLaren's, and there's usually 2 or 3 here to cover Ankeny or Stevens. So we kind of handle these 2 locations. The other directors handle the other locations. As far as the call schedule, our care center supervisor, which is a current intern, and she got promoted, so there's that opportunity to work up. She's going to Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. which then will allow us directors to just take calls on the weekends versus during the week. So we have to split every other weekend. So it averages to about 2 or 3 calls a month if you're fully staffed.
Right. And then can you kind of explain what education is required for somebody who wanted to be a funeral director? And then maybe on top of that, other type of careers that also are involved with funeral services?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the state of Iowa, every state is different, but their requirements is a minimum of an associate's degree. And then you can get into the actual program, and that's a year here at DMAC, and then you do a year internship. There's certain prereqs that you have to take. So sometimes if you've had prior college experience, some of those might transfer over, like your English, your science, your usual prereqs for a lot of the programs you go into. So then once you've completed the program, you have to take your state board exam, which is a licensed exam, just like a doctor or an accountant would have to take. And then once you pass those, then you are able to be a licensed funeral director intern, but you have to be affiliated with a place. So I have a master's degree. You don't need one that high in this field, but that opens the door for me. At some point, I'd like to teach classes, for mortuary or do something more on the teaching side. Within our field, and a lot of people don't realize, and this is something we talked about this morning, is there's other jobs within the funeral home. It's not just being a funeral director. I mean, you need office staff, you need part-time people to help run services. If you have a cemetery like we have in West Des Moines, you have to have your cemetery staff. And not all of those require any type of degree. It might just be a high school diploma. So even if you don't want to go full into being a licensed funeral director, there still are other jobs and opportunities within our field that you can still find that value and help families, but just on a different side.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's important to share is that I think, with the blind eye, it's funeral director, right?
Yep,
But there is a lot more that makes it run, right?
Yeah, we need them as much as they need us.
Yes, absolutely. Can you talk about maybe what are some traits that you would need in order to kind of go into the mortuary science field, as far as not only personality, but just professional skills that you look for when you're hiring?
Compassion's a big one, obviously. You're working with people at very detrimental and sucky times in their life. So having that compassion, but as I've gotten older in life and as I've been a manager, I also realize patience and tolerance. And that's not just for the families we serve, but for the staff that work for you. They're going through their own stuff and maybe they're overwhelmed and maybe they're not working as hard as you would like, or maybe, so you have to have that patience and tolerance with them as well, because they're your work family and you're sometimes with them more than you're with your own family. So that's really important. I think the ability to think on your feet and problem solve quickly is a huge trait. There's a lot of disruptions. Like I said earlier, you might be sitting at your desk working on one thing and then you have to up and leave, go on a removal, and then now you're gone for 2 hours, but you got to come back and sit down at your desk and pick up where you left off. So, the ability to multitask and adapt to the things that are going on around you, and just being open-minded. We serve a lot of families that don't always do the same cookie cut funeral as they've done in the past. We're moving more towards unique, personalized services. And unfortunately, there are those directors that, well, this is how we've always done it. This is how we're going to do it. They don't want to go the extra mile. And that's fine. They'll probably do well, but the ones that are really going to excel and, really provide that value is being open-minded and saying, hey, I want to help you honor your loved one. Give me your vision and let me run with it.
And with that, when you said compassion, being compassionate, how do you have that compassion, but yet not take home all of the things you deal with when you go home at night? And once you get to know a family, right, and you're getting to know their loved one that passed, how do you kind of turn that off, or do you?
I don't think compassion is something you can teach, just like common sense. I think as a good director, you either have it or you don't. And that's what will make you successful or not. And as far as meeting families, it's sometimes hard to turn it off because we are available 24/7. I get calls, I get texts, I get emails in the middle of the night from families, and it might not be a current one I'm working with. It could be a past one, but just that they know that we're there. So honestly, it does get a little annoying sometimes because you're never really off the clock. But as far as separating it, that's probably per each individual. You
Sure.
have to have that work-life balance. And sometimes that works in our field to have that, and sometimes you don't have that work-life balance. And so a lot of people may get out of the field because they can't find where that is. And a lot of it depends on the place that you work too, on what they value for their employees.
Yeah. And with that, what would you say is one of the most challenging things about your profession? Is it that the work-life balance, or?
That can be a challenge. Some of the other challenges, and we actually as a group here talk about it quite a bit, but the families are becoming more demanding. I feel like they have higher expectations, and I think that's because the society we live in, they want things done right now because that's what we're used to. We can't do that. I mean, we can't meet you and then have a service the next day. Like, there's other things in place. And so that's the challenging part, is families aren't wanting to listen to us. They want to do everything on their own and then let us know. When we're the directors, we're the ones that needed to direct because we know what's going to work best. So that can be a challenge. And right now, we don't have a lot of funeral directors coming out of the program looking for jobs. So right now, the job market's very tough. A lot of funeral homes are short-staffed. And then you run into the risk of calling other funeral homes and trying to steal people, which is where we're at right now. So it's a little different than what we've been used to.
Would you say are some of the most favorite things about your career?
Some of my most favorite things is I really like changing things like the service and doing things more personalized. That's my favorite part, is having something like a wow factor when the family walks in that they're not expecting. Having a family call you back and tell them, how easy you made the process and how they were scared or they were hesitant when they got to the funeral home. But then after we sat down and went through everything, they're so relieved. And that's what we want. We want to take the burden off of, the family. So those are the things I really like. And I also really like putting value in why you should pre-plan. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. So sometimes you can have fun with it, and sometimes you just have to pull it all together and keep a straight face.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiffany, if you could start all over again, would you change your career path in any way? And if so, what would you change about it? Or if not, what are you liking about it?
I don't necessarily think I would change my career path. I think I probably would have tried to start it a little sooner in life than I did. Because, as you get older, it gets a little harder to do removals. People are dying more in their homes. We're not as skinny as we used to be. So those are challenges as well. But I don't really see that there's anything I would change about it. So I figure this is kind of my calling and I'm here.
Absolutely. So with that, when you're talking about, starting younger, what advice would you give to young people looking at potentially going into this field?
I think the biggest thing for young people is get your foot in the door, go and job shadow. There's a lot more that goes on than just what people see. So I think by, getting either a part-time job or just calling up a funeral home and saying, hey, I'm kind of interested in doing this, I'd like to job shadow, have them come in and help work a service, really let them get a feel for what it's like. I think that's really the only way that you're going to really know if this is going to work for you. I know some people coming into the field may have not ever seen a deceased person. So if they have the opportunity to maybe go to the medical examiner, if maybe watch an autopsy, kind of get yourself that exposure and that experience, I think is really going to help. And just keep in mind too, like I said, focus just on being a funeral director. There are other opportunities within the funeral home, you know, that someone could benefit because that's their strength, maybe not necessarily funeral directing.
Absolutely. And I think too that, yeah, like you said, kind of maybe even going to different funeral homes too,
Mhm.
right? And
Yep.
job shadowing maybe different
Yep.
places because everybody does it a little bit differently.
Yeah, and every funeral director is different. A lot of people, you know, you've got young ones that are in their 20s still, you know, working. You've got people that are in their 40s. And then you've got people that are in their 60s. So you've got a big generations of people working, and there's different ideas, different opinions. So bringing it all together, like I said before, and making it work is something that's kind of neat too.
Yeah.
We do have a question from our
Alright.
guest today, and it kind of goes along with what you were talking about. Is there is a student who's interested in learning more about the cosmetology side of funeral work. So while you mentioned you don't have to be a funeral director, there's some other positions that help support the work that you do. Could you share a little bit about how that works and how it occurs in a funeral home?
So for like hair and cosmetics, most of the time us as directors, you know, we do the restorative part. So after the embalming, we do a lot of the cosmetics. I don't necessarily think you have to be licensed for that. Working at the funeral home helps. And if you're a student, sometimes it's a lot easier to get that hands-on experience in the prep room. A lot of the times we may have third-party people. So there's a couple hairstylists around the area that we know we call because they help all the funeral homes with their hair. So it just kind of depends on, you know, the facet of where you're working and if maybe you were requested to do the makeup. But there's a lot more to it than cosmetology. So it'd probably be better to almost be licensed because there are certain types of makeup and different things that we use depending on the condition of the deceased.
That's a good question.
Yes.
Mhm.
We do have one other question
Great.
in our inbox right now too. If someone is not associated with a church, is there a list of religious leaders who would help maybe be a part of that service or to, you know, just change the feel of the service if they aren't necessarily affiliated with a church?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know for us, we're a part of Dignity, which is part of the corporation. We actually have a certified celebrant. So anytime that a family may not have that church affiliation, but maybe they want to have maybe a church feel with some scriptures or prayers, or maybe they don't want any type of religious connotation to it, that's where the celebrant is a really good program because they can adapt to what the family's wanting. And that's another facet is, you know, being a celebrant, officiating services and, you know, making that unique, you know, to what the family wants as well. So yes, there are those people that we can call, let's say if the celebrant's not around as well.
Great questions, everyone. Can you kind of walk us through, like you said this morning, 3 a.m., you got a call. So what does that actually mean? What do you do when you get
Okay.
a call like that?
Okay.
And then where do you go? Like
Okay.
all that. And then when you meet with the family, what kind of things do you discuss?
Okay.
And then just kind of walk us through that so we kind of have an idea from start to finish how that all works.
Absolutely. So let's say you're on call in the middle of the night. We have an answering service that takes all of our calls. So a hospice nurse calls the funeral home. We have a family that's requesting your services. They'll gather the information, name, date of birth, date of death, time of death, place, next of kin, doctor. There's, you know, a bunch of vital information that we need right away. Then the answering service will then call the director that's on call. We'll answer the phone, get the information, and then we head to where the deceased is. So for example, I had to go to Ames in the middle of the night. So I will take the loved one into our care. Our care center is here in Ankeny. So this is where all of our embalming takes place, our cremations, and then the refrigeration's here too. So I brought the deceased back here to Ankeny, and then depending on the time of night, sometimes I may call the family in the middle of the night because I want to get permission to embalm. But I waited till this morning because I knew it was going to be a cremation. So then I would reach out to the family and then we would schedule a time to come in and make arrangements. So depending on those arrangements, they may decide to just do a cremation and no service. So it's a matter of just getting all the paperwork signed and then going through the goods and services, which is the contract, how much they're going to pay. And then if they decide to do a traditional service, well, then that's when we would pick out the casket, schedule the service, burial. And it's just going through that whole checklist, you know, calling the church and getting everything in order. And then we have the service and the burial. So depending on what the family does, you might be tied up with that family, let's say for 4 days, maybe it's a week, or maybe it's just a couple days, depending on what they want to do.
That's interesting. So typically, when you get the deceased in your care, how long typically until like the services? Is it like the week, or
It kind of depends.
Yeah.
If it's cremation, you know, we've got 6 days, 72 hours to either embalm or cremate. If it's an embalming, we've had deceased be in our care center for up to a month. And so that's where us, you know, we have to check on them, make sure that they're still in a good condition, that they're gonna hold up, because, you know, just like us as individuals, deceased are just as different. So they may hold up a little better, some of them may not. It just really kind of depends. And then having licensed embalmers, which is the state of Iowa, you have to be licensed, that makes a big difference too on the quality.
And then with like the caskets and such, since sometimes the turnaround time is so quick, I mean, do you have a lot in stock, or do they come from like a warehouse that's closer, or
So-
how does that all work?
Yeah, so now since COVID, we're having a harder time keeping supplies in, which that's kind of a little bit of everywhere. So right now turnaround is maybe 3 days. We don't like to do it any sooner. And we do have a warehouse in the Des Moines area. It's called Batesville Casket. And that's who we use. And if we can't get it from them, then they'll get it from like Kansas City or Omaha. But usually about 2 days, or if we can't, then we'll show the family something comparable to what they originally picked.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Where are we at for time?
We have about 6 minutes left.
All
Awesome.
right,
Well,
good deal.
do you want to kind of show us a little bit of the chapel area and just kind of walk us through like over here and kind of
Yeah,
how it
sure.
all works? And then
We can start in the arrangement room if you
Yeah.
want.
absolutely.
So this is our arrangement room. So anytime you come here to Ankeny Funeral Home, this is where we sit and meet the family. We don't have a lot of merchandise or caskets anymore, so a lot of the arrangement process is done on a presentation on the screen. And that's where they'll pick up most of their merchandise. We do have some urns. But yeah, this is where we meet families. We have stationery over there, so there's a lot of things to pick out and decide when you are making arrangements. And then our chapel is over here. Nice big open area. A lot of funeral homes now are getting away from pews. We're doing more individual chairs. So this allows the opportunity to switch the room around. Our company wants to move towards more round tables versus the chairs, because chairs don't create conversation, but round tables do. And so there's times where we'll have all the chairs out and we'll have round tables in here, which actually works really well and I like it. We do receptions. If we do, we can have food back here. So it's a chapel, but it's also a very versatile room too that we have now named the Linden Room because of our beautiful linden tree outside. A lot of families have come to us just because of the tree. So sometimes it's just that one little thing that brings them in. Yeah, this is our chapel. We do have one funeral coach out in the garage. Our other locations have a lot more fleet than we do. We have limos, but that's in our Weston location because they're a little bigger than we are.
And your crematory is kind of getting a facelift.
Yep, we're getting a brand new crematory, yay, but it won't be till probably June or July. So, you know, when things like that happen, then trade services, a lot of the funeral homes own their own trade service, which means that they do calls for other funeral homes. A lot of funeral homes are kind of going away from doing their own work and hiring the trade services in. Hopeful that we can do that because that would take a lot of the time out of what we do. But yeah, we're using other funeral homes to kind of help us right now. So we kind of compete, but we're also a big family too. So we help each other out, and it's a very small knit community. So if you make a
Absolutely.
mistake, the word travels fast.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, if anyone on the call has any last minute or any last questions, ask them now. But any other final advice or words that you have for students looking to potentially go into this career field?
You know, you hear when students grow up, oh, what do you want to do? I want to help people. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. Well, I feel like we provide the utmost customer service and human service field of anything out there. So if you want meaning in what you do and you want to bring value, this is a great field to be in. You know, because at the end of the day, we're all going to die. So it's not like you're not going to need us at some point. So, and if you work hard, it pays off, because I worked up very quickly to be manager here. So that's.
Yeah, it encompasses, I think, a lot of different realms of professions. I mean, a counselor, event planner.
Yes,
Just
exactly.
a lot of different things all in one, and very
Yeah.
fulfilling at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So,
Yep. And that's why I stick with it. Long hours or not, but that's why I stick with it.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much
Yeah,
for your
you're very
time
welcome. Thanks
today
for coming.
and allowing us into your beautiful space. We
Yeah, you're
appreciate it.
welcome. Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in.